How can you cultivate peak performance? I'm Kate Save. The Inspired CEO starts now. Welcome to The Inspired CEO, where each episode we explore the innovative wellness practices that are driving success and longevity in the modern business world. My next guest is a renowned sports physician, author and media commentator with over 30 years experience in sports medicine. He has worked with elite athletes in the AFL, Olympics and international sports, specialising in injury prevention, treatment and rehabilitation. Welcome, Dr. Peter Larkins.
Hello, Kate Save. Nice to be with you.
Well, thank you for rushing in here after surgery this morning. I know you've had a busy morning, but tell me, how did you become so passionate about this area and where did you start?
I think sport, I've been very lucky that people say, you've worked in sports medicine, but I say sport came before medicine. So from the earliest days, I was interested in physical activity, and getting the best out of yourself. So I think I sort of learnt the principles of what athletes need to do to be productive. And so over the course of my journey in the medical world, I've gone from being more traditional sports medicine, more into performance medicine in life and the business space now. So, but it was really fostered literally, as a 6-year-old, I was visiting my uncle who was a trainer at one of the football clubs down at Geelong. So I was in the locker room, seeing how to strap an ankle, smelling the liniment and getting a feel. And it was pretty rudimentary in terms of sports science and the sort of things people did then. But I was just interested in the human body and performance. And I said, now I've moved away from, the elite stuff, which I do a small amount of, really into just the general community health and fitness principles.
And you were involved in sport yourself, weren't you? And I've read that in your book. So tell our viewers about where you started in your sports career.
Yeah, well, look, I did every sport. I was lucky to go to school in Geelong, which is a pretty famous city for its schools and its sporting facilities at the school I was at. Primarily, I suppose I was football, athletics and cricket. Ultimately, you sort of, as you get into teenage years, you have to focus. So athletics was my prime thing, Kate. Middle distance running at school. I was lucky enough to be, pretty good at athletics at school. And then got into the state team as a 15-year-old in underage, and then into the state team as a senior, and then the Australian team, and then into national competition. So my pathway into sports performance was really based on middle distance running, which had all the principles of training, nutrition, sleep, recovery. So all those sort of things. So I had the personal experience as an athlete, but as a medical student, I was just fascinated with all the science behind that.
And I think that's a really interesting journey too, because it means you can actually relate to your athletes and you know what they're going through when they're talking to you about their struggles. Yeah,
I think, I always put myself in the shoes of the person that I'm looking after, whether they're an 8-year-old who's doing ballet or gymnastics or just starting out in, women's football, which the 8-year-old girls are doing these days, or whether I'm dealing with a 60-year-old golfer who's just having trouble with their shoulder. I know that they want to get the best out of themselves, but having been in their seat, and probably, in my early days, like 10, 11, 12, I think some of the doctors and physios I saw didn't understand the mindset of an athlete, and so they were pretty dismissive when you were training. If it hurt, stop doing it. And my attitude, I guess, towards my patients, and certainly that I wanted as an athlete and when I was a consumer, was what can I do? Not what can't I do, what can I do? And so it's all about, I think being able to communicate with the patients that I see, regardless of whether they're performers or not in the sporting sense, and try to get their end goal and what their realistic things are. So having experienced it yourself, the frustrations, trying to perform and not wanting interruptions in your ability to exercise or perform, I've sort of translated that just into everyday work now.
And you haven't just worked in Australia either. Tell us a little bit about your journey overseas.
Well, one of the things, because I got very early into this space of sports medicine, it really didn't exist as a field in Australia. So I really had to find somewhere to go to expand my postgraduate knowledge, if you like, after I finished traditional medicine. So I had to do traditional medicine, but there was no sports medicine course in Australia. There was no postgraduate. So one of the fortunate things of being on the international circuit as an athlete was I got to see what some other countries were doing. Now, primarily, I suppose the advanced nations were the Eastern Bloc in those days, right? Which was very hard to get access to as a Westerner. So I'm talking about East Germany, Romania, Bulgaria, of course, Russia. And so I had very, very fortunate to have make connections with one of the Olympic doctors literally when I was at school.
Yeah.
And he had some connections in East Germany, so I was able to sort of see what was going on. Now, I'm not saying we advocate what they did in East Germany, because I think most listeners would know that there was a lot of manipulative chemical manipulation going, but I was understanding how there was medical care for athletes even in the traditional legal sense.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated, I applied and was lucky enough to win 2 different fellowships, which allowed me to travel overseas to study sports medicine. So I really picked the eyes out of the places that I'd known about. Part of it was a Commonwealth restriction, so the Commonwealth countries were Canada, which was, you know, pretty athletic at the time I went across, and in the UK. But also, one of the great things about that trip, Kate, I was interested in the black Kenyan, Ethiopian runners,
Yes.
Tanzanian runners, because they were my competitors when I was running middle distance. And so I got to spend quite a bit of my fellowship in East Africa looking at the development of the young kids, because everyone says, oh, the black athletes are good because they study, because they train at high altitude. But there was so many more social factors, like what they eat. They grow their own food, everything's organic, no preservatives. They do run to and from school. They do live at high altitude, yes, but they're motivated to make their lives better by winning scholarships. So I learned a lot about, you know, what sports medicine was doing around the world before I came back and set up my own business in Australia. And I knew we were a sporting country, because we you know, we praise ourselves for being, you know, the sporting country. We've got our cricketers and our footballers and our tennis players and our hockey girls. But, you know, sports medicine is really well respected around the world now from Australia. So it's one of the things I'd love to see is the development of sports medicine, and the fact now that both girls and guys who graduate from medicine can do a 4-year postgraduate specialised course in the sport and exercise. It's a genuine specialist college in Australia, which didn't exist when I started.
Did you play a role in that college?
I did, yes. I was a foundation member of the college. I was on the board of censors, the board of examiners, everything in their days, because there was a very small group of us who had an interest, you know, in that particular field. So our applications to the federal government, it was a 16 to 17 year process to try and convince them that we were specialists, not just dodgy doctors who looked after, you know, elite tennis players at Wimbledon or AFL footballers. We were trying to show. So I was involved in help to set up on the course, along with some very important players in Sydney in our field. I was an examiner on the course, and then thank goodness in 2011 we were recognised by the federal government as a highly specialised medical field. So that really opened up the opportunity for younger doctors who wanted to go into our field to have a pathway and a career.
So you have pioneered sports medicine in Australia. Without your experiences and going overseas and seeing what's possible, it may not be what it is today.
Well, there's been some really good players. A lot of them named Peter by chance in terms of the top. I know Peter Bruckner's been on your show as well, so Peter and I are contemporaries. But certainly I had the first ever solo sports physician practice in Australia, so I was the first person to set up. There was a clinic in Sydney with Dr. Tony Miller, who had physios and nutritionists and podiatrists around me, but I went solo. It was a really big step to take. I put a brass plaque up on a wall down in East Melbourne, not far from here, and the person who makes the brass plaques for doctors had never made one that said sports physician. He asked me what that was, and I said, well, that's a term I'm hoping will become familiar in Australia, because everyone knew what a cardiologist was, everyone knew what a respiratory specialist was. But so yeah, I probably pioneered going into the practice and just saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be a GP who's interested in sport. I'm going to be specialised in sport. And I got a fair bit of criticism from older colleagues at that time who told me it wasn't a field that was going to take off, that I was restricting myself too much, that I needed to be this sort of specialist. But, you know, if you've got to believe, Kate, you probably follow it. And here we are, you know, literally decades later, and I think that I chose the right pathway.
And I think it is what often stops people in their tracks, is people that can't see what the potential is actually stopping other people from reaching their potential.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a belief in what you're doing. And of course, I mean, I know you've spoken to many business people who have followed their dream. And, you know, and as I said, I got a lot of pushback when I started, because, you know, sports medicine wasn't a specialty and it was just for the elite, and, you know, you know, it wasn't real medicine, you know, because you're only looking after the prima donnas of the world, you know. But I genuinely believe, because of my background as a young athlete, that there was a field. I believed Australia was a fantastic place to be doing that, let alone Melbourne, which obviously in Australia is one of the great sporting cities. So I had belief that we'd get there. even though there were a lot of other medical people who felt that sports medicine wasn't real medicine. And I don't think they're saying that in 2024.
Absolutely not. And tell me a little bit about, I guess, that journey then to where you are now. And you've written this book, The Healthy 100, and that's a little bit different to sports medicine. This is much bigger.
In the journey, of course, I've got a traditional medical practice where I look after people with sore knees and sore shoulders, but my elite athletes start at about age 50 these days and go to age 90. So I'm really looking after those people that are trying to stay active in life. You know, whether they're walking their dog, playing their golf, they've got a boat, they want to go to Wimbledon, they want to go to the races. So whilst I still do work with some elite athletes, I've just come back from the World Championships of the Hawaii Ironman, which is a really fantastic sort of triathlon event every year. And I love, Hawaii's not a bad place to be working. But it's real work.
Yeah.
But you know what I did get into probably 15 years ago, I got asked to do a few talks about men's health because I was advocating that men have checkups. I was advocating that you needed to exercise for health. And so that blended into not just a men's health, but really a non-gender specific talk on looking after your health. And so then I started to put all the ideas together thinking, you know, what have I learned over my journey in the medical field? What do we learn from professional or elite athletes? What do they get right to be good in performance? Why don't we transfer that into high performance in life? Which is workplace productivity, it's family, it's your social, it's your personal health. And I talked about asset protection. An asset is your personal health.
Yeah.
So it's not whether you own a boat or whether you've got a beach house or what car you drive, it's your health. Yeah. And that's really what your whole sort of focus should be. And a lot of people don't invest in their personal health. They're investing in all these other areas. They're too busy to think about themselves until they have a negative event. So my book was really a compilation of articles I'd written. I'd written articles about why exercise is healthy. I'd written articles about why sleep is important and why everyone knows you should eat well and you should exercise. But then I sort of came up with this idea of living longer, but living well and longer. So longevity is how long you and I live. Yeah. But living well in our health span is how long we live healthy. So at 90, you want to be going to Wimbledon, you want to be playing golf, you want to be still walking your dog and going out for lunch with your friends. And so
what tips can people take from these? 3 key tips they could take.
Three key tips, really. Well, there's 100 chapters in there.
I know. No. They need to buy.
Okay, so if I've got to dumb it down to 3 things, one is recognise little things that are going wrong in your health and have health checkups regularly. Get ahead of it. So find out. Medical technology has changed so dramatically in my time in medicine that we are treating things so well. Our grandparents died from diabetes, they died from breast cancer, they died from bowel cancer.
So get a really thorough checkup.
Yeah, so health checkups mean you can live with these conditions. The other thing is exercise is therapy. There's no doubt that exercise produces all the chemicals that we take to reduce blood pressure, to reduce cholesterol, to help us sleep, to reduce anxiety. You know your body makes those exact same chemicals when you walk around the lake or walk around.
Self-medicate with your own exercise?
So your body's a pharmacy, as I say. And so you're dumbing me down to 3. So nutrition would be my next one. Yeah, okay. I know where you've come from in your training. I was going to say sleep is important too, because I put 4 in, if you allow me to put 4.
We'll have sleep and
but
then
nutrition is fuel.
Yeah.
Nutrition is fuel because, you know, obviously we're talking about the way the body reacts, where it gets its energy from and how it can get rogue cells. And so a lot of the preservatives, a lot of the additives, the food colorings, the numbers on the back of the pack, if it's got a number, it's not natural, as I say to people. So I think having grown up in a country farm environment, you know, I think that if your nutrition is right, if you're exercising, your health, your checkups, you've got 3 of the big ticks of looking after yourself so that you can find out. And you should be doing that regardless of whether you're 15 or 85.
So if people want to purchase the book, where can they find it?
Well, it is all bookstores, as I used to say. If they haven't got it, they'll get it. It's been around. It's Amazon online as an audio book and drpeterlarkins.com, which is obviously my name and my website. I have a direct service where we can be posted out directly to people. So, but generally the bookstores, I've been very fortunate that Wiley, my publishers, have been getting it around. It's been at all the airports, so I've had lots of fun seeing people. And you saw it at the airport. Exactly, yeah. So it is available now. It's really a very simple outline of all the things we've got to get right, inclusive social connectivity. So I wanted to say it's really important. We saw what happened in COVID with social isolation. So there's medical stuff in there, of course, nutrition and exercise, but mindset and having to give yourself personal challenges for cognitive and emotional health and having social connections, which is why I talk about red wine and chocolate in there.
I must say that was my favourite part. So if there's one thing that I take away, it's the very dark chocolate, a little glass of Pinot Noir with the highest
Pinot Noir, the highest antioxidants, and resveratrol, that beautiful chemical that helps you stay young.
Thank you so much. So this is Tika and we'll be right back.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.